Good morning, everybody. Welcome to a beautiful brand new day, and welcome to Dear Miss T with our wonderful Terry Ruel. Good morning, Terry.
Oh, good morning. Thank you, Dana. Well, good morning to everybody. I hope you had a good Memorial weekend and were able to celebrate and honor the lives of all our lost heroes. And we are kicking off summer, so hopefully that's bringing some lightness to us all, too. Today we are talking about life after COVID, or trying to understand what life might feel like as far as our mental health and our feelings and our emotions this year. So, somewhat of a heavy subject, but I thought we'd try to figure out this month where we're at, and then maybe next month we can talk about things we can do to even improve our mental health going forward. Because a lot of research is coming out now. There's been some really great articles out by Harvard and different psychology departments on what we're finding people are struggling with their mental health after COVID, which, it's not completely over, but everybody's trying to find a new normal. And of course, the symptoms of where we're at this year are going to be on a continuum, from mild to severe, of course, depending on what has happened to you in 2020 from COVID. Some people have suffered much more trauma than others, with loss of life or businesses or financial security. But we have all suffered trauma, as we've talked about, because this was a time of life and death situations and challenges to our health and finances and all the uncertainty and changes that we've all been through. So it's taken a toll on everybody, whether, like I say, it's mild to severe. We don't compare. Pain is pain, and loss is loss. And we know that if we name something, it makes it more manageable to cope with and figure out what we need to do to take care of ourselves. And with COVID, I think naming the grief that everybody was going through was helpful, because we could start to understand, okay, we're in a grieving process, and we still are to some extent. But now that we're kind of getting on the other side of it, so many are feeling that how can there be a new normal, because I don't feel any kind of sense of normality yet, and trying to understand that what we're going to be feeling or are feeling is normal, even though it doesn't feel normal, because they're uncomfortable feelings. And we like to think of normal as being a sense of comfort and security and good feelings. So if we're still feeling some grief, or we're getting triggered old traumas, which is very common to happen, because people had traumas triggered during COVID, because it was such a challenging time of looking at life and death. But the PTSD that we're all going through almost post-COVID now is also triggering a lot of past traumas for people that they hadn't come up for them before. So that is part of it too. So knowing that what we're going through is normal for this kind of situation can really help. So what are some of the words that people are describing how they're feeling now with post the worst of COVID. Even those who are vaccinated, who, feel like they're safe now, and things are going back to normal to some extent with work and stuff, we still are hearing from people, the majority of people, that they still have a sense of time distortion. They're still having trouble concentrating. It's taking much more energy to communicate and to remember. People still feel like they're kind of in a fog a lot, kind of muddling through, or a sense of aimless drifting. And most people aren't saying they really feel like they're depressed or burned out, but they just still got the blahs. And one of the words that the psychologists are naming this is called languishing. And I thought that was a great word. And there was a great article my daughter-in-law sent me from New York Times on this. And languishing is that sense of, we're not, like I say, really feeling despair or hopeless, not really feeling burned out, but the energy's low, and just kind of that, that blah sense. And it can be very frustrating, too, because we think, man, I should be feeling excited. I should be happy. I should be, feeling really excited about life and better because, I can get back out and life is returning to normal. And so then it kind of throws us off and we think, what is wrong with me? Well, there's nothing wrong with you. Like I say, the majority of people are going to have some sense of this, languishing feeling. And some people, like I say, are going to still be depressed because they're still going through some deep grief. And that usually, requires getting some outside help because you don't want to get stuck in the grief to where you feel you start feeling that hopelessness. You want to get help to be able to cope with it. But those who are not grieving may feel, like I say, this languishing, just kind of tired, but not, burned out, but just having a hard time feeling it, kind of getting excited about life again. And the psychologists or psychology, we like to kind of rate things between, with this particular study, they're rating it between languishing and flourishing. So flourishing, of course, is what we all want to get back to. And it's going to be hard to be patient sometimes with ourselves and other people to know that this year, probably 2020, 2021 is going to be a year of languishing. It's going to take a while for people to get back to really feeling like they're flourishing. And that is kind of what the new normal is probably going to be. Some of the studies I've been reading say it could be, 2 years before people start really feeling that they're not languishing and starting to flourish again. And for those who are having more trauma to work through, it could be 5 years or more.
Wow.
So a lot of the churches and institutions are looking at small groups, support groups, and if you belong to an organization that can do this, I encourage you to talk to them about it. There is already getting some, guidelines you can follow, but just support groups for people to come and be able to process what it was like for them, what COVID, how it affected them and how it's affecting them now, and, what they're trying to work through, and just giving each other that support so that, like I say, we go from languishing and keep moving forward till we can flourish again. Because if people languish too long or feel like they're, really stuck in this aimless drifting, then it can start to fall back into depression. So we want to make sure we're supporting each other and trying to understand each other, that, the blahs are, pretty normal right now. And part of the new normal is going to be finding a new flow, because during COVID, people, I think eventually a lot of people found kind of a flow of how to deal with being home more or most of the time if you were, and just how to deal with all the changes, having to figure out how to shop and putting masks on and all of that. And, a lot of us kind of found something that we could do that kind of helped us have some kind of a normalcy with COVID. And that could be, binging on Netflix, to have some time where you could just go, escape from life. And that can be a good thing, especially if it's a program that gives you a lift or gives you laughter. That's still a good thing to do. A lot of people binged on Netflix or whatever movies at night and stayed up later than usual, because for some reason that gives us a sense of, freedom from everything. Some people, escaped with puzzles, or so I think we kind of found ways to deal with the changes for COVID, but we still haven't found, like I say, a new flow, a new normal for this period of time of healing from it. So one of the things I thought we could do today was take a quiz. So if you would all like to take this quiz, if you can find a pencil and paper, you can rate yourself to where you think you are between languishing and flourishing. And this is from the Harvard study. And it's only 10 questions. And it's rating yourself from 1 to 10. Okay, and while people are looking for a pen and paper, does anybody have a question on what we've talked about so far?
Yes, Terry. How do people go about detoxing from wanting to be connected all the time to the news, to see the COVID numbers, to see how many people have been vaccinated? How do we, withdraw from that, being addicted to those numbers and following it so closely?
Yeah, that's kind of that fight or flight button was pushed on for so many of us during the whole COVID time. And so it's hard to turn that off. I mean, it may not be on full blast, but every time we, listen to the news or put that information back into our nervous system, it gets that fight or flight button going again stronger. And so then we get the wanting to relieve that, and it becomes a vicious cycle because, we think we're going to relieve it by getting more information, but it actually now may be just stimulating your nervous system into overdrive again.
Okay.
So,
you have another question or a sharing of a thought from Holly, who is saying, I can't relate to thinking that the pandemic is over as long as our vaccination numbers are low and people are still catching and dying of COVID. It feels premature to me when there's still so much we don't know about when we'll be safer.
right. And that's very true, a normal thing to feel. I mean, it's not completely over, but everything is opening up. So how do we cope with, as a society, they're trying to create a new normal, or some people are trying to go back to the old normal, when we still know there is some safety precautions that need to be in place for people who are not vaccinated or people who are, immune compromised, that kind of thing. So part of it is, like I say, just substituting other information or other activities for the constant looking at the numbers and the, the things that are going to cause us fear and cause us anxiety and keep reminding us, that it's still out there. We all know it's still out there, but we also know that we are way ahead of the game now. And if you have your vaccination, you are safe. And if you don't feel completely safe, you can continue to wear your mask out in public. So, we got to replace that information with newer, better information, but also, like I say, not just that information, like creating some time where you're actually substituting time you might have spent watching the news or following something like that with something else that is helping you feel like you're creating a new flow. Okay, because that's a lot of it is trying to find a new flow. So we have to break the old flow and create new activities to put in there. And that doesn't mean, you're not going to still, keep up with what you need to, but you're not homebound anymore, so you can have more freedom to get out and get away from that that news cycle. And even if it's, going for walks, but substituting, whenever you stop any habit or try to break any habit, you have to put in other things that you did during that time with that habit. And the only way you're going to, help relieve some of those fears is to see that you actually can do other things and that you are okay. It's like the more we go out and we see that we're safe with our vaccinations, and like I say, we can wear a mask if we want, but the more you're going out and doing stuff and seeing that you're not getting sick and you're okay, that's going to be the strongest reinforcement that you really are safe. If we keep doing the things that we were doing, we're not going to, be able to get some of that fear down. It's like even if you quit smoking or anything, you have to substitute different things a lot of times or stay away from the places that trigger that urge or that compulsion or that addiction, whatever it is. I think we talked once about Breathing Underwater is one of my favorite books, and Richard Rohr talks in there about, we're all addicted to something, and all of us are addicted to our way of thinking. So the only way we're going to change our way of thinking about this that we have been so over and over for a year is to actually try to do things that help us create new ways of thinking. I mean, you can think some of it, through, but a lot of it is going to have to be actually doing things that help reinforce that. Because this affected us like addictions do. It affected you mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. I know it's affected me that way. So even like going back to church helps me to feel like I'm, being able to get safe activities again. Going to the grocery store, if you always had your groceries delivered or put in your trunk, we're going to have to do some of those things. And yes, we'll feel anxious in the beginning doing them, and that's the PTSD. But that's how you're also going to, like I say, reinforce that I'm okay. It's okay. I can do this. My hope is that with enough people seeing that those of us who are vaccinated are doing well and haven't gotten sick, and we're, going back to some kind of normalcy, that will encourage more people to get vaccinated too. You know, it's like, say, it doesn't matter sometimes what you say to people. It is going to be through their experience of seeing that the vaccinated people aren't getting sick, and maybe some people who aren't vaccinated are, that will help them overcome their fear of getting vaccinated. So, you know, it's going to be a process. That's why they're saying it's going to take a year to 2 years for us to feel like we're flourishing again. So, you know, the feelings that you're having right now are normal, the fears. And it's not going to, you know, like you say, subside quickly, but it will over time if we can keep working on this, on the kind of healing the PTSD from the, you know, the past year and a half. I hope that answers that question.
Thank you very much, Terry. And also, Peggy is offering, morning, that term is so right. I have been having the symptoms and feelings, nothing really wrong, just off. Also knowing things were different, just haven't found my new normal.
Yes, exactly. And knowing that is normal to feel the way you feel and be going through that, like I say, can help us, you know, and we can name something where that can help us know, okay, this is part of my healing process. This is okay to feel this way. And like say, next time too, we can talk about more ways to help us in our languishing, if you would like to call it that, and kind of get an idea today where you're at with it. So this scale of 1 to 10, you just rate yourself as 1 being very, very low and 10 being high. Now, what I would suggest is I would do each question with 2 answers. One, the first one, how you think you would have rated yourself before COVID, and how you're rating yourself right now. So I'll give you an example. The first question is, how satisfied are you with life as a whole these days? So before COVID, I might have rated that 8, very satisfied, highly satisfied. After COVID now, maybe I would rate it a 6, okay? Not really, you know, below 5, but not very high above it. 5 being kind of the middle, like not super dissatisfied, but not, you know, greatly satisfied. Does that make sense?
It does. And if it's maintained or even gotten better for some people, that's okay too, right, Terry?
Exactly. So the first one, how satisfied are you with life as a whole these days? That's the first one. And, you know, this is just to kind of give you a guide. It's not, you know, carved in stone or anything that we have to judge ourselves on. The point is to just try to see if you weren't sure how you were feeling, if you were really not feeling like you were flourishing back to where you were before COVID, that you might be languishing a little, that would be normal. Okay, number 2 is, how happy do you usually feel? Which, of course, like 8 would be very happy, 10 would be, you know, joyful most of the time, all the time. And like I say, before COVID, how happy did you usually feel? Might be, you know, 8, 9. Now it might be, you know, 4 or 5. Like I say, you're not really unhappy, but don't really feel like what you would recognize as happy. Okay. 3, in general, how would you rate your physical health? How would you rate your physical health before COVID and now that we're trying to move, like, say, forward out of COVID? 4 is how would you rate your overall mental health? And tell me if I go too fast. 5, overall, to what extent do you feel the things you do in your life are worthwhile? Overall, to what extent do you feel the things you do in your life are worthwhile? And if you're not sure how it was before COVID and you want to just do where you're at now, that's fine too. Some people, like I say, like to compare. It helps them to get a better picture. 6, I understand my purpose in life. A 7, I always act to promote good in all circumstances, even in difficult and challenging situations. I always act to promote good in all circumstances, even in difficult and challenging situations. This is much harder when you got the blahs.
Yeah.
8, I am always able to give up some happiness now for greater happiness later. That may be much harder right now. Like we're trying to hold on to what little happiness we might feel. Number 9, I am content with my friendships and relationships. Where are we at before 2020 and where are you at 2021? The last one, my relationships are as satisfying as I would like them to be. Okay, so of course, the higher the score, the closer you are to flourishing. And like Dana said, you might find there wasn't a lot of difference from pre-COVID to almost post-COVID, or we're trying to get to post-COVID. And that's okay. There's no, like you say, right or wrong here. It's just trying to see if you don't feel like you're flourishing where you were or would like to be, that it would be normal, and that's the direction we're going to go in, to try to find that flow that brings us into flourishing again. And we can talk about ways to do that next month. And you can think about what's worked for you so far in other challenging times, or what helped you during COVID that might help you again now. But knowing that, you may feel like you're muddling through this, trying to figure this out, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm. Del Marie is sharing a comment. I don't live in fear with COVID or any other illness at this point in my life. I've accepted my life as it is and have accepted the end of my life. Am I crazy? And she also adds that she's considerate of others while she's out. She still uses her mask even though she's had her vaccines.
Oh, that's wonderful. And no, I don't think you're crazy at all, Del. I think that especially as we get older, we are more and more situations of facing our mortality appear. And hopefully we can start to face that, because that's how we're going to be able to have transition much more peaceful. And I think that's one of the difficult struggles, like you say, for so many people with this, is they've had to face mortality young in life, or before, they really had the preparations that us older people may have had, or they have been triggered, like I say, with so much grief, because it is also brought up mortality for loved ones and, for past losses. So it's a complicated, PTSD is a complicated process, but it's also a normal reaction to abnormal circumstances.
Mm-hmm. And for some people, a paranoia has been triggered.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And it's just a tricky time.
Yeah, and that's a natural thing. I mean, when we're faced with mortality, usually the first few times we're going to get paranoid. I mean, it takes a while and a lot to work through to get to where you have some peace with mortality.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and like you say, it's not common. I mean, you think of how we're trying to help, doulas and people who are, I think, is that what you call when you're like the hospice workers, people who try to help people transition. It's still relatively a minority of people who have faced their mortality and worked through their fears by the time they are on their deathbed. It's still a minority, but we're working on that. Our society's not been very good at helping people. Mm-hmm. At least our white society has not been good at facing death and helping people understand and work through it and not be, having paranoia and fears.
Exactly, which is why I, created the soul minding protocols. Let's talk about death, and let's talk about approaching death.
And what a perfect, important time to be doing that, because, we have all been faced with that. Mm-hmm. I mean, there are a lot of people who are in denial with COVID that didn't want to face that, the fact that this could very well be life and death situation for anybody. But that doesn't mean it still hasn't affected them subconsciously. So
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, so what a great show today.
Each other better too.
I think so. I think, for me, one of the greatest gifts that I've been able to give myself through all of this is a good walk in nature out of my back door, right? Going outside and basking in nature.
Yes, I think that's huge. Nature is such a healer and can keep us grounded and feeling like we're still connected and not in this aimless drifting, which is, much scarier.
Mm-hmm. So if somebody is having struggles, I talked to somebody recently who's having a struggle even going outside anymore because they've become very comfortable being the hermit.
Yep.
And it's a stretch to even go outside and engage with other living beings. Maybe some counseling is in order.
Yes, and there are, people that have become agoraphobic because of this ordeal that we've all been through. So it is going to, like say, for some people, don't be afraid to ask for help, because this might be too hard to do by ourselves. I'm a one to think none of us should try to do it by ourselves. We have to create these small support groups. Or at least have one friend that we're doing this with. And we just have to take little bites, and it can be a friend just coming over and going for a walk with you, around the block, or like you say, out in nature somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And we only have to do these in, little steps and little bites, because we're not going to be able to do it any other way, probably.
Mm-hmm.
And even, we may feel one day like we can and go gangbusters, but then, a couple days later, all of a sudden we feel like we're, back down on the couch. And that's going to be normal too. We're going to, take 2 steps forward and, 1 step back or 3 steps back, and know that this is going to be a process and this is going to happen and it's okay.
Mm-hmm. And then, as Del Marie is adding to the conversation, on top of it all, we have in the headlines and, right up at the surface of life, racism, violence, politics, all of that has also risen to the surface, and it can add to the PTSD and the overwhelm. What are your thoughts about that, Terry?
Oh, I think that's exactly right. And we are in very extreme times, and that is making the PTSD more difficult for the COVID, because we are, I think, all suffering trauma from all of these things, not just COVID. So, we do have to look at all of that and then figure out, okay, what bites can I take out of each one of these things? If, maybe I only can do one at a time.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe for someone else, writing their representatives or doing some action about some of the injustices that are going on or have gone on can help them. Other people, it's going to be too much. They can only, try to get to the grocery store this week. So, not judging each other, but supporting each other, and knowing that as long as we, are still trying to take care of ourselves and being aware, everyone's going to find their own new flow. And, those of us who have so much empathy and take in so deeply the pain of the world are really going to have to take care of ourselves and have boundaries with how much we allow in, because it is just going to be too hard on our nervous system and our bodies as well as our emotions. So, even though we may want to do more, we have to be aware too that we have to do this in steps and stages and amounts that aren't going to make us sick.
I like that. And I love what you said about small bites.
Yes, because it's easy to, not know until we're overwhelmed that we're just, like I say, I had that a few weeks ago where I just sort of bottomed out and just realized I was just holding so much grief about so much stuff, and, just had to cry and sob and work through it and work it out. But I also had to learn from that I have to be more aware of how much I'm allowing in, how quickly, without being able to process it. That's one of the great things about, creating these support groups too, is if you can process stuff out each week, it's not going to build up. And that's why therapy can be so helpful. It's just a way for people to keep on trying to work through their stories and release stuff so that it doesn't just keep building up until it's overwhelming.
And if anyone needs to get a hold of you, Terry, for some counseling, how might someone do that?
They can call me at 231-250-4335. It's on my page, or email me, pathwaysbr@hotmail. I think it's all on my page. I can post it too in the comments after the show.
Perfect.
Feel free to call anytime when I do phone sessions.
Peggy is saying, yes, this has been very helpful. Thank you.
Oh, good. I hope so. And
And
thank you all for wanting to do this work.
mhm,
I know it's another thing on our list, right, or on our
exactly.
plate sometimes.
And Holly is also sharing this has been helpful. Thank you, Terry.
Oh, you're so
Yeah.
welcome. Thank
So
you guys, and God bless.
have a beautiful day, Terry. Have a gorgeous day, everybody. Thank you for tuning
Thank
in.
you all. Love ya.
Thanks, Terry.
Bye bye.